introduce tariff. Okay, so once you introduce tariff, it is assumed that international trade has taken place and you want to protect the local producers.
Because domestically the price is 500.
Yes.
You have to put tariff to also domestically they can produce the products.
Exactly, just to incentivize them, you understand?
To
because
ordinarily,
the local producer were producing at 500 and the market settles at equilibrium and things were fine, you understand?
Yeah.
But because they know they still have a shortage to meet up with, they have to open their border. But they open their border, they have influx of cars coming in. What happens? The price drop and settles at world market. Okay, once it settles at world market, what happened to domestic supplier? They might likely, fold up. So in order to incentivize them or protect them, and that is why the effective rate of protection comes in. They have to protect them, they have to introduce tariff. So now we have agreed and we understand what happens here, right?
Yeah.
So now, because we have shortage of about 1 million, okay, so we have to call in importers to come in. But in order to protect our market, okay, we have to introduce tariff. Impose tariff. Let's say tariff, either a volume tariff or specific tariff. So maybe we will treat both together.
Sorry, I have a question.
Okay.
This 300, we already opened our trade.
Pardon?
With that 300, we already opened our border.
Yeah, it is because we open. That's why I call world price.
Yeah.
You cannot have world price if you have not opened your border.
There's already international trade.
Yes, because if there is no international trade, we will settle at this.
Yeah.
And remember, once international trade comes in and the price becomes cheaper, what happens to producer surplus? It will shrink. What happens to consumer surplus? It will rise. It's as simple and straightforward. And if you look at it in this graph, I've told you anytime you are looking at producer or consumer surplus, if you are looking at producer surplus, if you are looking at producer surplus, which graph should you be looking at?
For
producer surplus. Fiona?
The supply.
Do you understand? Is that taken? So if you are looking at producer surplus, the supply curve is what you should be looking at. So in this case, when the price was at equilibrium before we open our border, what was producer surplus? The producer was this much, right? But if you open our border, what happened? It reduced. So the whole of this place gone. And producer surplus is in favor of who? The local producers. So imagine the local producers are losing this much. The company will likely fold up. So what do? We have to try to mitigate that effect and introduce tariff, right? So now we are looking at introducing like ad valorem tariff, which is a proportion of the price. Okay? Is it making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when the tariff comes in, what happens to price naturally? It goes up. So let's introduction of ad valorem tariff of 10%. So 10% of this will be 300, then the tariff will not be, the price will rise naturally to 330, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now look at this. So this is now the world price after tariff, right? Is it making sense?
Yeah.
You know now, by the time we introduce tariff, what happens? What happened to local producers? They produce more.
More, yeah.
You see, now we have incentivized them, so they're able to produce more.
But also decrease the quantity.
Show me on the graph what they're able to produce.
God bless you. So this price is now 330, right? But at what quantity? Let's say addition of 200,000. So 0.6 million become 0.8 million. So at this quantity, the local producers are able to produce more. You see, before, you know what happens? You know, the producer surplus has shrinked. Now what happened? It has increased again. So the question asks us, what is the best on producer surplus? So naturally you see.
What is the area of producer surplus here?
The question also says the increasing the producer surplus.
It's just right.
Why is it true? You can show that
So
because of that.
do you understand?
Yeah.
So the next thing is what happened to demand? Before we could demand 1.6 million, but because there is a tariff now, your purchasing power naturally will reduce.
Yeah.
So what can you do as a consumer?
Sorry, before you move ahead, I'm sorry. A tariff tends to decrease consumer surplus and increase producer surplus. So how do we write that place? It has increased the producer surplus. Introduction of tariff, right?
You know what? We'll answer all those questions
Okay.
in details, but I don't want just to be drawing the graph as if you cram the graph and put it on the board. You should know why we are putting every graph.
Okay.
Because the point is that, fine, if you are I'm not a genius, I don't know how to cram. So I want to understand. Do you understand? I cannot cram graph. I don't know how to cram graph. Do you understand? So I want to understand and go and write it. So, and I want to believe it should apply to, many persons too. So if you understand how we get step by step of this, it can come in another form. You cannot say it can come in another form. They can even put figures. They can even say if the producer surplus is so amount and the total production is the total cost, calculate the consumer surplus or consumer loss. It could come in any form, but once you understand the concept, you will just be smiling at the question. So in this case now, we have introduced tariff, the price has increased. The local producer can produce more, they can produce 200 extras. Do you understand? But what happened to local consumer? I've told you when you are talking of international tariff, you are talking of consumer, you are talking of the local consumer. Okay, so in this case now, what happened? Let's say this is decreased by 200, let's say this is 1.4 million, right? This was 1.6 million before.
Yes.
Before we introduced tariff. Now, we have three, you know how we got these three different, all this quantity now, you should know how we get those quantity. Do you know how we got those quantity now?
Yes.
Look, let me recap. How did you get 0.9? Equilibrium,
Price.
quantity, and equilibrium price. Because all this will be in your analysis. Secondly, our border is now open for international trade because naturally we are short of those items and we need to call on countries that have comparative advantage on that item in that industry. So immediately they came in because they could produce at a cheaper cost as a lower rate. So immediately they came in, they could supply at 300, from 500 now to 300. At that 300, what happened? Ideally, remember the law of demand. If the price reduces, what happens to quantity? It will increase. So now the quantity has increased from 0.9 to 1.6. But unfortunately, the local producer could not supply up to 1.6, they could only supply 0.6 million before immediately the international trade takes in. But now we need to protect the international and the local producers. We increase tariff. So as the price has increased as an effect of tariff, okay, the local producers they are now incentivized to produce more. Therefore, they could produce 200,000 extra. Is it making sense? Bola, do you now understand? The question they're asking, that's why I'm explaining again.
Because the price is going high at 330 because domestic production, they increased their production because they were selling 330. Before they were selling in 300.
Yes, because it was in 300.
Yeah.
It was in 300. Now we need to protect local industry. We have introduced tariff. Tariff is just for protection of our domestic production. Do you understand?
That's good.
So
the domestic production.
the 30 is the tax from tariff.
Yeah.
Okay, you can call it tax. If that is how you understand, but it is not it is tariff.
It's one type of tariff.
But how did you get that 330?
That's 10%.
That's
of-
tariff.
I just told you, he said we should assume figures, right?
Yes.
Remember, we have assumed figures. And our base figure we assume 500 and we
Yes.
assume 300
300,
assumption.
yes.
But from this now, we are not assuming again. We have to
Yes.
start calculation.
Then from 300.
So from 300, the rate of tariff is 10%.
No, I have a question on that 300. When the market was open, the price came down to 300.
Yes.
And they were able to supply what?
Look at the supply now. When international place is taking in, international traders taking in, then they can only supply at 600,000.
Which is the supplier at home.
Yeah,
Anytime we are talking of supplier, and this is I told you, this is the supplier curve, and it's what SD is what domestic supplier. And I told you when international trade takes place, what you see, you have to understand. Every other supply curve is it's now perfect. It's flat. Okay, so anything you are now seeing, this is a supply curve actually. Because it is flat, but it is what it is this is as international trade level. Okay? Now international place has taken in. Do you understand now? Now we have introduced tariff of 10%, which will increase what?
So 10% of 300.
Don't mind me, I just want to get it clearly. When the market was open, the price came down to 300.
Yes?
Yes.
And how much were they able to supply? Is it the people? You know the
This
market
is it now. Look at where they
Yes, Shegun, you know the market is open now. They are bringing in goods from other countries, right?
Yes.
So this 600, is it the one from other country or the one the local producer?
The local producer. It's a local producer.
Where is the one they brought in from when the market was open? Where is the one they brought in to?
It is the difference. The scarcity will come. Look, because local producers were able to produce this. What was the supply? I mean, what was the demand?
Okay, that was 1.6.
This was so the shortage,
Okay, which is 1 million.
which is 1 million.
Come from
We
international.
have to sort it out from international trade.
Okay.
Is it making sense now?
Okay.
No. Then the 10% of 300 is what gave us the.
It's to increase the price further.
Okay, 10%.
That is the tariff rate, 10% tariff. I think that is sorted, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, because of the